Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy, the podcast where two mental health professionals talk about their mental health journeys and how they navigate mental health while working in this very fun field to work in these current times. Today, I am joined by a returning guest, which is always fun, a very talented therapist, and even better human, Kelsey Philippi.
That's so nice. Thank you.
Kelsey, thanks for coming back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Kelsey was very generous with her time when I was like, hey, I had to reschedule my guest for the week. Would you want to record? And so, yeah, I'm very appreciative.
Happy to be here.
For
Thanks
being
for
here.
thinking of me.
I don't remember. I'm a bad podcast host. Kelsey has been on before, so if you want to hear Kelsey's background and marvelous journey into becoming a therapist, that was sort of your first episode, was how you got here.
Circuitous route.
We talked about bird tattoos. It was a good time. But today we're going to talk about like an actual topic.
Yeah, we are. I think that's exciting.
Yeah. I like having like guests back on to be like, now that people know you, what do you think about this thing or like a particular topic in the field?
Yeah, a kind of an introduction to who I am and then what do you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun. So yeah, in these super fun, fashy times we're living through, what's sort of been coming up in therapy? What's on your mind?
I haven't heard the word fashy in that way.
Not wrong, though.
Need to trademark that. Yeah, I think one of the big themes that keeps coming up in my sessions lately is guilt and shame.
Mm-hmm.
And what are those two things? How do they differ? How are they similar? And part of trying to tease what is mine versus what is systemic or what is, I grew up in a culture that's very neurotypical and I am not neurotypical and therefore am I bad? And is the system bad? Is it a combo?
Yeah.
So that's been a big theme lately. I don't know if that's coming up in your sessions too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, differentiating guilt and shame is a topic I spend a lot of time on with clients because I mean, there's a bit of a running joke that like any pleasure is a guilty pleasure if you're raised Catholic enough. Mm-hmm. So I think the difference between guilt and shame and why one is semi-functional and one's sort of a waste of our time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then another thing that's been coming up as part of the fun blend of those two pieces is dissociation.
Yeah.
And how much of dissociation is functional and how much of it isn't functional and how to differentiate and come back into the present versus what is really intolerable. And that's your brain and body signal to say, hey.
Yeah. I got to peace out for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So there's been a lot of talk about safety, security, dissociation, function, guilt, shame.
Yeah.
Really, like just only the light and breezies.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all fun in therapy. It is. I'm not complaining about being a therapist. They're just systemically trying times. So yeah, how do you talk about the difference? Let's start with that. What's the difference between guilt and shame and why can't people use those words interchangeably?
Yeah. The most simple answer to that is the differentiation between I am bad and I did something bad.
Yeah.
And that typically is a segue into there is a functional amount of guilt and shame. And it is a very, very small dripper drop of guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And the small amount of functional guilt or shame leads us to better relationships. It shows us what maybe we need to take accountability for or how we have been in the wrong on something and how we might make amends.
Yeah.
To reestablish that connection.
Yeah.
What we find, I think, with a lot of folks who come to see me who are, chronic trauma survivors and are really trying their best is that functional amount of shame takes root and becomes massive and kind of infiltrates every thought, every fiber of their being and becomes completely debilitating.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to clarify, guilt is that, whoopsies, I've done something wrong. I can course correct. I can learn from this mistake. whereas shame is more of that debilitating. This is how I differentiate it for folks. I like to use metaphor, and so I'll talk about your very lovely, loyal golden retriever.
Mm-hmm.
And when it does something wrong, it may go pick up its favorite toy or something and bring it to you as sort of a repair attempt. Mm-hmm. That's guilt. Shame is like tucking your tail between your legs and going in a corner and hiding. Mm-hmm. And one of those is sort of again, like you use the word functional, I would agree with that. Like one of those is an opportunity to course correct, take some accountability, and one of those is like really takes you out of interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in this book that I forgot to bring, but I love, Coping with Trauma and Dissociation, there's a section that talks really explicitly about 4 ways that shame manifests. The first one is attacking self. So that really critical, negative, you can't do anything, you're so stupid, why do you think that you're worth anything? Mm-hmm. That really self-directed shame. The second one is attacking others, which sometimes we call projection, of everybody else is the problem. Yep. It's not me. This is everybody else's fault. I'm so bound with anger is usually associated with that one. The third one is a complete avoidance of your inner experience. I'm going to tuck that away and never look at it again. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth one is, what is it? Attack other, attack self, avoid inner experience, and withdrawal. The fourth one is isolate. Yeah. So not only am I completely unlovable, sometimes they collaborate. Not only am I completely unlovable, I also can't be around anyone as a result of that. Yeah. And when we can start to understand those shame scripts, it can be really empowering to then understand where they came from and how to resolve some of that core wound, core injury, whatever phrasing you want to use.
Yeah. 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 I love the question I love to ask to get to some of this stuff is whose voice are you hearing that in? Mm-hmm. And people always look at me like, I work with a lot of neurodivergent folks, so it's pretty safe to assume we all have an internal dialogue, but some people don't. I don't see them usually in therapy. But everybody sort of looks at me as like, well, in like my voice. But once you dig in a little bit, it's really fascinating to find out if it's a parent, if it's your first grade teacher, if it is some other figure in your formative life. It's not always someone early in life, but it often is.
Mm-hmm. It often is, and I think that that's where using some parts informed work plays nicely into this whole picture too of does it have a certain shape or color or texture or you know, if there's a wall, what's the wall made of? Are there times where that wall feels stronger or feels more accessible or there's more porosity or you know, what's it, if it's a wall, what's it protecting and like what's it keeping safe on one side and what's it keeping out? When did it first evolve? How old does it feel? Mm-hmm. What age? And then how historic? Sometimes it's a really young feeling part, but it's been around forever. Yeah. Sometimes it's a new part. And those questions, people often look at me like, what are you asking? But then once they lean in a little bit, it becomes much clearer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think with shame specifically, like it's not something that a lot of people have spent much time interrogating. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, if it's sort of a rock in your garden, we're ignoring it. Mm-hmm. We're not turning it over. We're not taking it out to look at it. And so it's one of those things where asking some of these questions is really helpful because it's not something people have thought through or even like taken time to think about thinking through. And so these are weird questions, but it's helpful because, again, it's something that your brain has sort of internalized that it's not supposed to think about.
Mm-hmm. And I think with you and I both probably have a lot of clients who grew up in very shame-ridden cultures. Mm-hmm. So that
America.
That I am bad gets really caught.
Yeah.
You know, particularly if they grew up in very religious environments. Maybe they're queer. Maybe they're not sure if they're queer, but there wasn't even the opportunity to explore that. That piece had to get shut in the I'm avoiding my inner experience, or I'm going to have the social withdrawal, or I'm going to attack myself or attack others.
Yeah.
That's a really common way that can play out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I mean, you bring up queer folks. I work with a lot of religious trauma, so definitely queerness is something that you are taught to be ashamed of. But even just healthy sexuality, regardless of gender expression or sexuality or attraction, like, that's also shameful. So that gets really complicated. But like, you and I both see a lot of neurodivergent folks, and again, like, unless your impairment's really high at a young age, which is also shameful and you feel bad for the late diagnosed folks that I see, they didn't get diagnosed early on, so they just had to learn how to navigate this on their own, and a lot of that masking is coming from a place of shame or feeling like bad or wrong somehow.
Absolutely. And I think this parts exploration style of if mask maybe equated to shame in some way, what was the reason it developed? And then I started exploring kind of authenticity versus attachment and what came up there.
Yeah.
What needs were being met by having to mask in this way or hide parts of yourselves in some way. And what's it like to now know maybe you don't have to. Maybe we can invite those parts in a different way.
Yeah.
Maybe we can unburden them or free them, whichever language you want to use, depending on how you've been trained. And that can feel really kind of freeing. It can feel really emotional. It can feel really unexpected. People are often surprised. They start welling up with tears when we even talk about what would it be like to invite that part in.
Yeah.
What would it be? Does that part know that you made it this far? Does that part who developed really early, maybe you were, 8, 9, 10, do they know that you made it to your late 30s? That usually people then start crying.
Yeah. That's why we have Kleenex in our office for these questions.
Sponsored by Kleenex.
The tissue paper. Yeah, and I think authenticity has sort of become a buzzword in our culture because there's a lot of trauma awareness. There's a weird, sort of cultural zeitgeist approach to trauma, I think, that is maybe different than what we as people who specialize in working with trauma think of as trauma-informed. And so there's this idea of authenticity, and a lot of my late diagnosed neurodivergent folks, when we talk about unmasking, we talk about authenticity, there's a lot of fear around that.
Yeah, one of the beliefs that we tend to work on in my therapy room is I can learn when and with whom I can be my authentic self.
Right.
Because that mask has served a function. It wasn't safe. It wasn't secure. So when we work with parts, we're not asking them to go away. We're asking them to step back and let another part come in.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the more popular trauma-informed authenticity conversations are like, woohoo, be your authentic self. And that's great, but we also live in a place where there are true and genuine threats to safety.
Yeah.
And so being authentic does come with risk. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the weird sort of influencer social media model of be yourself, and anyone who doesn't support you in that is gaslighting you or being harmful in some way is just unrealistic. And that's not me promoting patriarchy or promoting the capitalistic society we live in. It's just no, a lot of these management techniques we learn on our own are because of firsthand experience, because it was unsafe, or we did not get to experience secure attachment to somebody who loved us, or the version of love we were taught was also mixed with feeling unsafe. And it's your brain working correctly to want to still protect yourself in those settings.
Yeah, and then starting to build an evidence bank for what does safety, security, authenticity, support, connection look like in a non-shaming way.
Yeah, right. What does it look like? And then separately, additionally, I guess is a better word, what does it feel like?
Yes. Yeah. And then can you keep doing the uncomfortable part of trying it over and over and over again?
Yeah, we're just breezing through months of therapy here.
Yeah, this is a timeline within 8 to 10 weeks.
No, and I don't want to be doom and gloom about it. I mean, some people I think have some of this stuff, and something like getting permission or being able to invite a certain part out or invite a part to step back is really, some people like it clicks and like there's freedom in that and they're off to the races. And some people it is like analysis paralysis on like, I have choices. What choice should I make? And so I don't want to say there's months of therapy. It's not a prognosis like that. But for some people, this is a slow process to go from intellectually understanding some of this stuff and being aware of it and catching it in yourself, and then to like, well, what does safety actually feel like versus what we just think it might be?
Or what feels familiar is different than what feels safe.
Yeah. And like comfortable versus safety. And yeah. So I think, I mean, there's a lot of variability in how somebody can go through this process, and what healing looks like is not uniform by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, it's definitely a person by person thing.
Yeah. And in a way where I would say like guilt is a fairly universal experience. It is human to make mistakes. Shame, I don't know if I don't know that I would say shame is universal.
Shame is also so tricky because it's hard to talk about even in therapy. Like the feedback loop of shame is, oh my gosh, I'm so ashamed to even bring this up. My therapist is going to think I'm an idiot, or I'm too embarrassed, so it's like a really pervasive and interesting conversation to have as a more process oriented conversation first, and then to say, okay, well, what was that like?
Yeah. I often find this is unhelpful to share. But I often find the things that people are most shameful of are like not at all requiring of that response. Oftentimes clients build up something they don't want to tell me about for like a long time. And then when they finally tell me, again, this is the unhelpful part. Like, I'm so disappointed. It's such like a nothing issue, or it's such a common thing. We're just like, oh, you're the third person who's brought that up this week. Like, but they have this idea that they're the only person who I will have seen in 16 years with this specific thought pattern.
Isn't it interesting to think about how many things people think are the first time we're hearing them?
Yeah. In my informed consent, I tell people how long I've been a therapist, and that very little surprises me at this point in my career. And that was true like a decade ago too. Like, it's not because I've been a therapist for a long time. You learn pretty quick.
Yeah. And how isolating that feels.
Yeah.
To feel like, oh gosh, I'm the only one who's ever experienced this, and it's so painful to bring up. It's so hard to bring up. I'm going to overwhelm my therapist. I'm going to stump them.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think shame is, again, that experience, and this might segue a little bit into some of the dissociation, is like, I think people feel shame about the thing they were like socialized to feel shameful of. But what's scary is like the feeling of safety.
Yeah.
Like, what's scary sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes in the therapy room is that like, oh, I could say this and nothing bad will happen. And like, what does that mean if I'm in my late 30s or, wherever I'm at in my life, that like I've carried with me my whole life and I haven't had to.
Yeah. It's a beautiful grief segue. Grief and relief.
Yeah.
Flip sides of a coin. Very uncomfortable coin.
Yeah. And one that doesn't stay one side up or the other.
No. Yeah, it is really interesting to hear how shame has woven into the fabric of people's lives, and when you pull on that loose thread, what feels really destabilized when we take the shame out of it. Yeah.
I have so many people who are ashamed of how their house isn't clean. I'm like, I have ADHD, I have 2 children and 2 dogs. Like, I don't think you understand what my standard of a clean house is.
I walked into my kitchen before I left to come in here, and I was like, "Who lives here?" Me. I do. I made the entire mess that was my kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, again, I think these like culturally, like we're socialized to feel shame about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a silly thing. Like, are you and your dependents and the people you love and care about like safe and fed?
Mm-hmm.
Throughout most of human history? That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But we're like distraught
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't look a certain way.
Yeah, Casey Davis's book, How to Keep House While Drowning, is one of my favorite ways of flipping those internalized societal messages on their head
Mm-hmm.
of, oh, why do I do this way? It doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
What if I did something that did work for me?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think those like paradigm shifts and those like flipping of the scripts are so important, especially for the neurodivergent folks I work with, of like, this is never going to work for your brain the way your mom did it, the way your grandma did it, the way that your, former military dad needed to organize things or whatever. Like, what we are taught in our family of origins often is not what works well for our brain.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And a lot of people, like, that's a revelation for a lot of people.
Yeah. And can that be okay?
Right. It sure can.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, gang, that is okay. But yeah, I mean, we internalize so many of these messages, and I think, yeah, like you said earlier, the shame cycle is one of like not talking about it, and so these are not conversations that get normalized real often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my other metaphors that I like to use with shame is that shame is like fog, and talking about it is like the sun.
Yeah.
And it helps dissipate, and then we can see what the fog was really covering underneath.
Yeah. And in true metaphor form, nothing. There's nothing to the fog once it dissipates.
Yeah.
How fun.
Talking is like the sun. That's the takeaway.
Yeah. Unbiased take from two talk therapists. Let's shift a bit. So, because dissociation was part of what you wanted to talk about,
Yeah.
too.
Well, I think the function of dissociation, which is kind of like the same as a conversation of what's the function of shame. Where did it come from?
Yeah.
And why was it so important then? And can we begin to draw awareness to what safety and security might feel like to the body, to the brain, in order to remain present?
Yeah.
That's really scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we back up just a sec here and talk about the different forms of dissociation, the different ways it can show up for people who might not be familiar with that word or think it just means one thing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. One of the tools I like to use in my practice, particularly before I start doing some deep trauma work, is the dissociative experiences scale, which is a 28-point questionnaire that has 5 different ways that dissociation shows up. And it's not an exclusionary tool. It's not like you do this and then you don't meet the criteria, you can't do trauma work. This is now a conversation tool to say, whoa, tell me about that.
Yeah.
And it breaks up the types of dissociation into, I think, 5. So a pretty lay person's way of explaining dissociation is, at some point, the brain or the body has determined that it is no longer secure enough or safe enough to be fully present. There's like a checking out that happens. And so often with that comes, no longer making long-term memories. It can be really disorienting. It can feel really scary.
Yep.
That can, with the DES, the dissociative experiences scale, they break that into amnesia is probably the most extreme, where you're really losing blocks of time.
Mm-hmm.
A more common one is derealization, where things feel kind of weird. Like all of a sudden, maybe I feel a little bit detached, or things feel a little blurry or foggy, or I'm looking at it from a different angle, but I'm the one experiencing it. It kind of feels like the perspective has shifted.
Yeah.
Deep personalization it has similar features of feeling like, oh, am I even here?
Yeah. Sometimes that like more out of body or almost like third person view people experience.
Yeah. So kind of, looking down on something, looking from, maybe you're sitting at a table like we are right now and you're like looking at it from a different chair.
Mm-hmm.
There are 3 empty chairs here, but it feels like maybe you're watching Jeremy and I on a podcast versus being the person on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we did amnesia, we did derealization, we did depersonalization. How do they characterize the other 2? We're gonna pause this and I'm gonna look it up.
Oh, we can pause.
I cannot remember all of the things. So with the other few are absorption, fantasy prone, and influence of ego states. So absorption would be more of like, I'm completely absorbed in whatever it is that I'm doing and I'm not really encoding that. Fantasy prone has some similarities. It's more of that like maladaptive daydreaming. I have gone to a different world completely. And then influence of ego states is, again, a little bit more intense, a little more extreme. That's more of like a dissociative identity type space that is much more uncommon than the type of client that you and I are typically working with in an outpatient setting.
Yeah. A lot of times I think people, some of this stuff is a lot more common than people realize because sort of Breaking Bad has a character who experiences a dissociative fugue state. Mm. And like that's rare and also like is generally going to require a higher level of care. That's somebody who's sort of checked out with reality for a while, hours up to several days even. And so that's not normally who we're seeing in outpatient therapy necessarily, but like people who might dissociate when they drive. I think a low risk version of this, it's probably not true dissociation, but sort of like when you get to where you are and you're like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And your brain was just sort of on autopilot. Again, that's pretty low risk. Sometimes the brain is just doing that for resource management more than anything. But when it's a trauma response or when it is something that is related to safety somehow is when we as therapists start looking at it as like a dissociative response.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then for me in this type of questionnaire, then we have a long conversation about like, when is that happening? How is that happening? When do you know? How can you tell? When do you check in? When do you check out?
Yeah.
And I think driving is a great example of what would it be like if you started challenging those muscle memory things. You always turn right out of your driveway, turn left.
Yeah.
Does that help you stay more engaged?
Yeah. And again, like there's skills and techniques around mindfulness and all these things. And I think if it's working with trauma and trauma responses, like understanding some of those triggers and like, I think a lot of people, it's just gaining the awareness that like, that's dissociating because a lot of times it is this safety mechanism that's kicking in. It's the limbic system. It's the right at the where our spinal cord meets our brain stem. It's not our full brain making a well thought out decision. It's just happening almost as like a knee jerk reaction. And so that awareness is really key for a lot of people first of like, oh, I am checking out during that. Some people are like, I was at this party and I was like having this weird out of body deja vu thing. And like, we can talk about it very directly then. And sometimes people, it takes a while to realize that is what they're actually experiencing.
Yeah. And then once they do start realizing it, sometimes that causes the cascade of shame. Like, well, what does that mean? I must be bad.
Yeah.
I must be bad at therapy if I'm now aware that I'm doing something. No.
Opposite. You're getting better at therapy. I always say, not always, I often say to people, awareness is the one thing I can't teach in therapy. And that's a little bit of a lie, but I try and normalize that, like, it is difficult to gain that self-awareness, especially when we're doing talk therapy. Like, a lot of times just talking about it makes us more aware of it. And that's the trick. But also that, like, our brain does a lot of stuff on autopilot. It is an organ. Like, your kidneys are doing things right now, so is your brain, and you're not cognitively thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of people, sort of that weird realization that, like, not everything our brain is doing is something we're cognitively aware of.
Yeah.
And then you have the trickiness of, like, and sometimes your brain is, like, checking out for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be a convoluted sort of thing to gain awareness on in order to just start working on it.
Mm-hmm. But even listening to this podcast is allowing you more awareness.
Well, and then, right, like you said, like, then that shame response might kick in, and now, you know, it's hard to talk about, or we feel bad for talking about it, or we dissociated during session, and, like, how embarrassing. And again, like, from the therapy perspective, like, how convenient that you had an episode in session, because then we got to work with it firsthand. Not that I want people dissociating. It's not fun. It's not good for you necessarily. But also, like, it's not a shameful thing. It's not bad. I don't use bad or wrong as a paradigm very often, if at all. But, like, yeah, it's part of what we do, especially as trauma therapists.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's very interesting. And I think when people learn about, like, some of the things, like, I've had clients who have really strong deja vu sometimes, and, like, oh, you're just dissociating. And that's very, again, like, we sometimes our only awareness of, like, psychology is, like, pop culture and, like, so media, not, like, social media necessarily, but, like, in this movie, it's like, oh, no, that's not really how it works. That's, like, an amalgamation of 3 people throughout history who've had these really intense experiences. That's not that's not actually what the average person would experience with dissociation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like you should have a segment that's like pop therapy terms decoded.
Yeah. Yeah. I should. I would just be angry too much. It's like, you should talk about RFK every week. Like, no, it's not good for my mental health to do that.
Very reasonable.
Yes. And again, like, not every, like, we talk about driving, like, again, that's not necessarily causing any level of impairment where you need to go to therapy because you weren't totally mindful on your drive home.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, this is oftentimes causing some level of impairment or discomfort or making your life harder because it's happening in a way that doesn't feel under your control or that you can respond to it in a way that is intentional. Mm-hmm. It's happening to you.
Yeah. I feel like we need to have a disclaimer of, please be careful driving.
Yeah. Sure.
Be safe out there.
Be safe out there. The riskiest thing you do on a daily basis is get in your car by a very wide margin.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean don't get in your car. Just, you know.
Just be careful.
Buckle up. Pay attention. Yeah. Don't text and drive.
Truly.
Yeah. So there's enough disclaimers. Don't text and drive is a real one. And buckle up. These are all good things. I do the autopilot driving sometimes, for sure. I used to do, I'm going to defend it a little bit here. Look at this shame response I'm having. I used to do deliveries for a bakery. Mm. And it's like, so if you have like an 8-hour shift and 6.5 hours of that are in a van or a light truck, like, you do zone out a little bit.
Yeah, a little spacey.
Yeah.
I think I have the luxury of not ever getting to drive home in the same route because of all the construction right now.
What a positive reframe to construction in Milwaukee.
I can't not pay attention because the road is suddenly closed differently every day.
Yeah, every morning I'm driving on, like, North Avenue or MLK Drive, and, like, yeah, you gotta be on the lookout there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lovely reframe. That's not how I feel about construction. But no, I mean, I try and highlight again with sort of the pop psych and cultural zeitgeist of psychology stuff, like, 2 people having the same experience and taking a different recollection of it isn't gaslighting, right? And, like, so there is sometimes where, like, not every time that we're not 100% mindful is dissociation. Mm-hmm. And when we're working it in therapy, it usually is causing some level of impairment. And again, like I don't have a DSM level that I ascribe to for how to assess that. I leave that up to the client, but like it's causing some discomfort or making the client's life harder because this thing is happening. Most people aren't like, ooh, I should call up Jeremy or Kelsey because I'm kind of a space cadet when I drive. Like, I don't know. Kelsey says take a different route.
And also assess what was the function of the dissociation. Did something happen and you suddenly started dissociating?
Yeah. And again, I mean, I see it often with very normal, typical, expected human experiences, especially with like religious trauma, things around like sex, where people are dissociating. I see often it's paired with substance use, and it's hard to tease out the dissociation because people are self-medicating or trying to enter an altered state, probably because their brain knows they're going to dissociate. And so some of this stuff is, again, not first session when we're first meeting with clients. This isn't always what's coming out. Oftentimes it's stuff that there's a level of safety and we've made progress in therapy where now we can tackle something like this.
Totally. I think you brought up an interesting point that relates to numbing, right? What's the function then of numbing? Where does that come up? What would it be like to start feeling? Before you start feeling, what would it be like to consider starting to feel?
Yeah.
And that can be a really interesting dynamic too. Were you dissociating? Were you numbing? What would help me feel safe and secure enough to feel? What types of things am I feeling? Is my brain organized in a way that it's hard for me to identify what it is that I'm feeling? Maybe I don't have as acute awareness or a nuanced awareness, and can I start to build those things foundationally? So fun. Yeah, and I'm just thinking of, again, like some of the different communities that I see regularly where this stuff is really hard, like religious trauma. A lot of us are taught that like our body is sinful. And so having awareness around anything body-based is really difficult. For a lot of the neurodivergent community, like you got this supercharged brain up in your noggin and you've been taught or learned or picked up messaging that like it's not okay to show that. And so like you sort of get out of touch with yourself. So some of this stuff is difficult to catch, and then once we're catching it, it's still even difficult to feel like we have some sort of say in how to respond. Yeah, I think it can be really freeing though.
Yeah, as therapists, like obviously we do this work because the journey and where people land is so lovely.
It is.
Yeah.
When I say fun, I really do mean like it is fun.
Yeah. When I joke about that, it's because it's not always fun to experience.
It's not fun to experience, but it is fun to help
We
someone.
sound like psychopaths as therapists sometimes. It's like when my athletic training friends will send me like injury videos. Like, did you see this? Something wrong with you. No, it is. And again, because we like doing therapy because we get to go on those journeys with people to see what it looks like when they are aware and when they are well-resourced and when they're able to respond intentionally. And it's like this beautiful thing.
It's the therapy magic.
Yeah. And it's like attainable. You know, I think when people first come in with some of these big, heavy shame or dissociation, these things that are really difficult and complex to untangle, I think they feel like hopeless sometimes, or like it's such a long process. And I always tell people like it's not a one-to-one. If you were, spent however many years feeling this way, it is not a one-to-one. You need to do that many years of therapy to learn a new neural network and to create that new pathway in your brain.
And I think too, it's not like you heal from it one time and then you never have to deal with it again. It's not like, oh, I have strep throat and now I've taken the course of medication that's going to help me not have strep throat. It's more of I'm experiencing shame. I'm working through the shame. I now have different identifiers and awareness so that I might catch it earlier in the process or I might not, but I have some different tools. Yeah.
And for some people, it gets so easy as to not really be noticeable. And for some people, it's always like an intentional practice that they need to sort of maintain that awareness and practice their skills regularly so that they can use them intentionally when they need to. don't think that, again, there's not a uniformity to what healing looks like.
No. I'm going to shout out another book.
Yeah.
Kristen Neff. Love her.
Absolutely.
Big fan.
Yeah.
Mindful self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
If you're listening to this and it's resonating, maybe go listen to one of Kristen Neff's guided practices.
Yeah. We'll put the website. She's got a lot of free resources on her website that are great. She's great.
Yeah. Big
We'll
fan.
put it in the show notes. Yeah. We'll put all the books in the show notes. Try and educate people. Yeah, and again, like, I think I'm hesitant how to sort of throw my fellow therapists under the bus here.
Did you say how to?
Yeah. How to gently and kindly do this. I think sometimes clients like us and want us to like them, and so we'll feel shame. And that's one thing. But I think if you are actively really trying to work on this stuff and you feel shamed by your therapist, like, hey, it's probably a good sign to get a new therapist.
Yeah. I think that's definitely at least a yellow flag
Yes.
to have a conversation about, if you feel comfortable. If
Yeah.
you have a therapist who...
Secure attachment would say, let's talk about it.
Yes. And if your therapist is not open to having that conversation, then I would say get a new therapist.
Yeah. There are times where people definitely feel shame in bringing something up with me, and, you know, I'm not like razzing them about it. I'm just like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I try and normalize that, like, this is a thing that is normal to talk about in therapy, and I'm glad you shared it with me.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes with some humor on how very normal it is that this is the third or fourth conversation I've had this week on this very topic.
Yeah, and I think that in doing trauma work or attachment work as a therapist, knowing that rupture is a real part of this process, and is a very useful part of the process to be able to have those emotionally corrective experiences with clients to say, hey, we can work through this together.
Yeah.
And it reinforces that you are not bad for bringing this up.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I did mess up, and here's how I am showing you how we can handle guilt. Yeah.
Because again, guilt as a sort of warning sign or marker in our brain that we've done something that isn't values aligned is useful.
Yeah. I'm not saying like go intentionally rupture all your clients, but
Correct.
maybe be open to what's going on.
And rupture and repair is sort of a very common phrase us therapists use. It's in a lot of books around attachment. This idea that with secure attachment, there's room for rupture and repair. We can put our foot in our mouth. We can say the wrong thing or word something poorly, and we can correct it. We can take ownership and accountability, apologize, and course correct.
Yeah.
And that's like, a healing thing. Again, it's not emotional abuse because somebody worded something poorly. Again, like there's most human relationships require some level of
attunement.
Yeah, and like repair. It doesn't always need to rupture. It doesn't need to be that specifically. It's not always catastrophic, but like, there is work to have a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
It's not just we vibe really well and don't have to ever do anything.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Rupture doesn't have to be an explosion. It can be, hey, that came out weird. I'm really sorry. Let me try that again.
Yeah. Or, hey, that kind of hurt my feelings. Can you reword that for me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, like, ideally, clients can do that with their therapists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's a skill, too. And not everybody gets a lot of opportunity to practice it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Saying to your parents or whomever, hey, gang, that kind of hurts my feelings. Can you reword that? I, for one, cannot.
There are spaces I can imagine it, and there are I can learn when and with whom I can be my authentic self.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
It's a big one. It's hard. Can you imagine, like, telling some of your oppressive figures in your life, hey, can you word that more gently? Like,
yeah.
if you want to maintain that relationship and that feels like a healthy and secure opportunity to connect,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I
But
think
maybe
part of
not.
this conversation we had before we started recording is like, there's a systemic piece in all of this of being unsafe and our brain checking out because the thing that is making us feel unsafe is larger than any one individual can handle.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you're talking about some of the systemic oppression, some of the intentional, cruel injustices in the world, like, yeah, sometimes our best option is to check out.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's not for everyone. And it's not recommending we bury our heads in the sand and don't ever confront things and stand against injustice. That's just acknowledging that, like, sometimes if you are part of a marginalized community that is being actively oppressed, that you might not be resourced to the point to take necessary action. You might just be resourced enough to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And that is a reasonable response in some of the intentionally cruel times we are living in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes it might not be the time to start pulling all this stuff up.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm healing in community. There are people who are well resourced enough to be doing that.
Yeah.
Again, this is systemic work does not require any one individual. We're not having the William Wallaces of the world overthrow the corrupt government. It is always a community that changes things.
Yes. Yeah, I spend a lot of time talking about that in my room too, particularly around climate work
Mm-hmm.
and climate distress, and that quickly is polycrisis distress. And so we spend a lot of time talking about community and
Yeah.
relationship and reciprocity and values alignment and finding people who can support us when we're feeling depleted
Mm-hmm.
and supporting others when they're feeling depleted. And it's not, in some ways, it's a very simple thing, and in other ways, it is a very, very complex thing to be in community.
Yeah.
And understanding what's within our scope of control, what's within our scope of influence, where we can learn, and where we can push collective action.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably the phrase that is uttered the most in my office is control your controllables.
Mm.
And again, like when we're talking about systemic injustice, when we're talking about systems that need changing, it is not one responsibility. It is building community because it takes collective action.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm a neurodivergent introvert, and I'm somebody who's very loudly, proactively, like, we are wired to be social. We are wired to be in community. And again, that doesn't need to mean any specific thing. That might just be a handful of people.
Mm-hmm.
It might be one other person that you're in community with. But like, again, that we are not wired to do this alone, let alone navigate 3 or 4 genocides and global climate crisis and the rise of fascism all at once on our own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need each other.
Yeah. Otherwise, our brain turns off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Look at that. We tied it all together.
What a wrap up.
Yeah. It's pretty good. Where do you find community?
Oh, I love that question.
Thanks.
Where do I find community? I feel like I have really intentionally poured energy into friendships
Mm-hmm.
and just get so much love and joy and connection through my friendships in a way that has offered a lot of healing for me.
Yeah.
Another place I find community is through my professional organizations. I am the co-chair of the Curriculum Development Committee at the Climate Psychology Alliance, And they have linking conversations.
Yep.
So if you're a professional who is doing a lot of this type of work, they do have very frequent kind of peer consultation spaces. And if you're not a clinician or an allied professional, you're a person who has a completely different career, they also offer climate cafes,
Yeah.
which are very similar to death cafes, where anybody can go, they're drop-in, they're hosted virtually, and you can share your experience and maybe feel just a little bit less isolated in what's going on.
Yeah. I liked how you said they're like death cafes, as if that was a more accessible thing that most people would know about. Separate episode, Kelsey.
We'll get there. It's just a teaser. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Sometimes I forget that people aren't marinating in what we're marinating in all day.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think it sounds a younger therapist version of me would have like rolled my eyes at being like your professional affiliations are where you find community, but Kelsey's are really cool, first of all, and it speaks a lot to like I think there's this idea of groups you should be a part of because it is like the professional thing to do. But like, you know, I'm a marriage and family therapist, so I'm a clinical fellow for the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I am a clinical fellow for the Wisconsin Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. And like, I don't get a lot from either of those. One of them carries my professional liability insurance, so that's nice. But like, otherwise, you know, again, those are like those sort of should have ideas as a young therapist that you pick up on of like, this is my niche, so I should join this one. Where a lot of times I think at this stage in my career, the professionals who I get the most from being in community with are people who are either philosophically aligned with me or are doing far more like narrow niche stuff than just like, oh, we're all LMFTs.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, I don't know, just where you get your licensure doesn't mean that people are philosophically or ethically aligned with the way that you like to work. And so sometimes, unfortunately, it is a bit of work to find that community that's actually a good fit. But if you are like rolling your eyes at like, ugh, professional fellowships, like, yeah, I mean that, then find better ones, find ones that are a good fit. There are people out there who are doing the cool work that you want to be doing and connecting with. It's just, you got to find them.
Or if they aren't, what if
it.
you did? Yeah, I think community is really important. I think, you know, these different parts of our identities and holding space for community in different parts of our identities is a huge one. I'm also a very like creative, artistic person. So I have, you know, artist communities, musician-y communities. Those things feel really important to me.
Yeah. Throwing some clay, right?
I love throwing clay.
Yeah.
Love throwing clay. Love a little craft.
Yeah.
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 What about
And
you? Who's your community? Who you got?
oh, it's so weird. It's very weird to talk about because again, as a neurodivergent introvert, for a long time, like I just didn't have any. Because like in a lot of ways that feels comfortable for me. And so it was work to sort of push through some of that, like some of it was just outright disdain. But a lot of it was my own discomfort around like just owning that, like, yeah, I don't get a lot from going to these very sort of dry, basic level, not intellectually stimulating CEU courses and some of this other stuff. And so it's just sort of like me having to do some work to be like, oh, yeah, like there are people out there who are doing cool work that like I vibe with. I just actually have to find them. Some of it was definitely like leaving the church, which happened later in life for me. And then finding some cool pagan-y, witchy folks. And then like honestly leaving that group and like landing in a little less formal space has been really good for me. Yeah. So again, I think I try and highlight for people that like community doesn't need to be static either. Like it's okay to find one community and have it be a really useful chapter of your growth and then like outgrow it or grow in a different direction, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think a thing that you and I have also connected on as a fellow neurodivergent, introverted therapist, person, human, is the importance of nature in our lives, and maybe even conceptualizing being a community member with non-human beings.
Yeah.
And like I love to bird.
Yeah.
And I think of birds as my community too.
Yeah. For sure.
You know, another way to think about.
Yeah, and I think like I always felt a little bit bad about having like very sort of categorized communities. And as I've come to like understand and work with my own neurodivergence a lot better, like I'm pretty happy with that because it works really well. And then like once a year I'll have like a big get together that mixes my categories, and I'm reminded why I don't do that. Because my volleyball friends don't always get along with my board game friends, don't always get along with my nerdy philosophical friends. And that's good. It's good that I have communities in all those spaces. And I don't have very many people who cover all those spaces. And so I think, again, like, it's okay to not have a community that checks every single box. It's okay to have more than one community.
Yeah. I think we all need more than one community.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. I feel like there's a really, well, I was going to say there's a really viral snippet, but then I'm reminded that maybe it's just my algorithms that it's viral, but Robin Wall Kimmerer, big love for Robin Wall Kimmerer. Just everybody take a minute, go read any of her books. I was crying about moss in one of her books. But she's got this quote going around of like, how can we make any sort of change if we're not like appreciating the berries, going and picking berries? And I have completely not gotten that quote right, despite how many times I've seen it.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a real element to how can we have community, or how can we be in awareness if we aren't engaged with whatever is important to us.
Yeah.
You know, for me and for a lot of people, being in nature means like we kind of got to get out there.
Yeah.
We got to go see it. We got to go feel it. We got to go experience it. There's only so many things we can read before we have to experience.
Yeah.
And accessibility to that is a huge factor for sure, but there may be a more accessible way of experiencing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Community.
Yeah. Find your people. Yeah.
Or your non-human beings.
Join your mushroom spores.
Oh my gosh. This is not a therapy book, but did I tell you about the fungi book that I read?
I don't think so.
Oh my gosh, everybody.
Stay tuned for episode 3 with Kelsey.
Merlin Sheldrake wrote this book about mushrooms, and it's one of the best books I've read all year.
Yeah. Cool.
I need somebody to read it so I can talk about it with him.
Absolutely. We'll add it to the show notes.
Great.
We'll put it on the list. Kelsey, this was lovely.
It was lovely.
Thanks for taking the time. If people want to learn more about the work you do or connect with you, where do they go? How do they find you?
You are welcome to find me through the Era Wellness website. I work out of a practice called Era Wellness in Wisconsin. I've got openings in person or virtually. And if you want to join me in the Climate Psychology Alliance, that would be a cool place to meet you as well. So that would be the Climate Psychology Alliance of North America, which is also cool that it's not just the U.S. We've got a lot of Canadian members. We are gaining more members in Mexico, and trying to expand our offerings to Central America as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. We'll have links to all that, so it is nice and easy for folks to find.
Yeah. See you there.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeremy.
And to all our wonderful listeners, thanks for tuning in again this week. We'll be back next week with another new episode. Take care, everyone.